Why decisions are hard. There's a strange, almost magical tension in the split second before you decide. Multiple futures hang in the air at once, each one vivid, each one possible, each one pulling at you in its own direction. We hit these crossroads constantly, sometimes dozens of times a day, yet the whole process of choosing still feels oddly mysterious, even alien. The strange part? The difficulty doesn't always match the size of the decision. Picking what to eat for dinner can feel heavier and more paralyzing than accepting or turning down a job offer. That mismatch isn't random. It's a clue to how our minds actually work. Our brains didn't evolve to be perfect decision engines. They evolved to keep us alive in a dangerous, unpredictable world. Our ancestors needed fast, gut-level calls. Is that berry poison? Is that rustle in the bushes a predator or just wind? Fight, flee, or freeze now. Those snap judgments save lives. Today's choices are different beasts. Abstract, long-term, full of probabilities, trade-offs, and competing values that ancient survival wiring wasn't built to handle. The friction we feel, that knot in the stomach, the mental looping, isn't weakness. It's the natural clash between old hardware and modern complexity. What really makes decisions tough is all the invisible weight they carry. Opportunity costs. Every yes is 1,000 no's. Second-order effects. What happens next and next after that? Uncertainty. We're always deciding with incomplete information. Perfect knowledge doesn't exist. Hidden assumptions. We're running on mental models built from past experiences, biases, and guesses we don't even notice. Emotions, fear, desire, regret, hope, they color everything, often louder than logic. Even small choices can feel huge because they trigger the same ancient threat detection circuits. What if I choose wrong and something bad happens? The brain treats ambiguity as danger. But here's the shift that changes everything. When you realize that decision difficulty is built in, not a sign you're broken or indecisive, you can stop beating yourself up. You can approach choices with more kindness toward yourself, more patience, and more realistic expectations. Understanding the why behind the hardness lets you build better systems. Frameworks that work with your brain instead of against it. Ways to clarify values, limit options, gather just enough info, and move forward even when it's uncomfortable. The aim isn't to make every decision effortless. That's impossible. It's to get better at navigating the fog, to choose with clearer eyes, steadier hands, and less self-judgment. In that quiet space of understanding, something opens up. You start thinking about thinking itself. And suddenly, the crossroads don't feel quite so terrifying. They just feel like part of being human. One choice at a time, with a little more compassion for the mind doing the choosing. First principles thinking. It's an ancient but timeless way of cutting through bullshit and getting to the absolute core of things. The basic idea is simple. Instead of accepting how things are, or how they've always been done, you break everything down, layer by layer, until you hit the bedrock truths that cannot be broken down any further. These are the fundamental, undeniable facts. From there, you rebuild your thinking from scratch, often ending up with something completely different, and usually better, than the conventional path. Elon Musk explains it perfectly with SpaceX rockets. Everyone knew rockets cost hundreds of millions because that's what they'd always cost. But Musk's team said, hold on, let's ignore history and look at the raw reality. What are rockets actually made of? Aluminum alloys, titanium, carbon fiber, copper, etc. When you price out just the materials, no overhead, no legacy processes, no, that's how it's done markup. The real cost was about 2% of a typical rocket. Everything else, layers of inefficiency, tradition, bureaucracy, and accepted norms piled on top. By stripping back to first principles, they could redesign manufacturing, reuse rockets, and slash costs dramatically. The same mental move works for almost anything, even tiny, personal decisions. Say you're stuck on, should I take this career path? Most people compare resumes, salaries, prestige, what parents want, what friends are doing. First principles thinking flips it. Forget the surface noise. Dig deeper. Ask, what do I actually need from work? What are the irreducible elements that matter to me? Maybe it's intellectual stimulation, enough money to feel secure, time/freedom for relationships, or creative expression. Those become your axioms, the non-negotiable fundamentals. Now you can evaluate any job, side hustle, or pivot purely on how well it delivers those core things, not on job titles, LinkedIn optics, or societal approval. The process isn't quick or comfortable. It demands relentless why questions, like a curious 5-year-old who won't stop asking, "Why do I believe this? Why is that actually true? What real evidence backs this up? Where did this assumption even come from?" You'll often discover you've been running on autopilot reasoning, borrowed beliefs, cultural defaults, fears of looking weird, or habits you never consciously chose. That realization can feel destabilizing, but it's also liberating. Because once you've cleared away the inherited junk and you're standing on solid, self-verified ground, you can build something authentic. A life, a career, a decision that actually fits you, not a hand-me-down version of someone else's blueprint. First principles thinking doesn't give you easy answers. It gives you clear questions and a clean foundation. From there, the rebuilding is yours, and it's usually far more creative, effective, and true to who you are. So next time you're facing a big or small choice, don't start with what's the normal thing to do. Start with what's actually true here at the very bottom. Dig, question, rebuild. That's how breakthroughs in rockets, careers, or everyday life really happen. The 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle. Back in 1906, an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto was messing around in his garden and noticed something odd. About 80% of the peas were coming from just 20% of the pea pods. He started looking around and saw the same uneven split everywhere, especially with wealth in Italy, where roughly 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. What started as a quirky garden observation turned into one of the most powerful patterns in life. Most results come from a small minority of causes. We call it the 80-20 rule, and the exact numbers aren't always perfectly 80-20ths. Sometimes it's 70-30ths, 90-10ths, whatever, but the core truth stays the same. Imbalance is everywhere. A tiny fraction of inputs creates the vast majority of outputs. In real life, this shows up constantly. 20% of your daily efforts probably produce 80% of your meaningful results. 20% of your customers/clients often bring in 80% of your revenue/profit. 20% of the clothes in your closet get worn 80% of the time. 20% of the bugs in software cause 80% of the crashes. 20% of your study time might deliver 80% of your actual learning. It's not a strict law. It's a recurring pattern that emerges in complex systems, business, nature, habits, relationships, creativity, you name it. The real power of the 80-20 rule isn't just noticing the imbalance. It's using it as a focusing tool when you have limited time, energy, or attention. Instead of spreading yourself thin trying to improve everything equally, you ask one brutal, clarifying question. Which 20% of this is creating 80% of the value I actually care about? Examples: learning a new language? Focus on the 20% of words/phrases that appear in 80% of everyday conversations. Building a product/business? Identify the 20% of features that solve 80% of your users' biggest pains. Managing your day? Protect and double down on the 20% of tasks/habits that move the needle most. It's also a permission slip for subtraction. Sometimes the smartest move isn't adding more effort. It's ruthlessly cutting the 80% that only contributes 20% or less to what matters. That could mean saying no to low-value opportunities, simplifying processes that add friction without payoff, letting go of draining relationships or obligations, deleting apps, subscriptions, or habits that eat time without giving much back. This isn't about being lazy or skimping on quality. It's about alignment, making sure your finite energy flows toward the few things that disproportionately shape the outcomes you actually want. In a world that screams, do more, be more, hustle harder, the 80-20 rule quietly whispers something radical. Strategic less is often the path to much better results. Stop trying to fix everything. Find the vital few. Pour your energy there. Let the rest go. That's not cutting corners. That's cutting through the noise to what actually moves the needle. One focused 20% at a time. Opportunity cost thinking. It's probably the single most useful mental model for making better decisions without overcomplicating life. Every single choice you make is actually two choices in one. You say yes to one thing, and you quietly say no to everything else you could have done with the same time, energy, money, or attention. That no part, the thing you're giving up, is the opportunity cost. It's the real, hidden price tag of every decision. Economists love this concept, but you already feel it intuitively. Binge watching a show tonight means you're not reading that book you've been meaning to start. Scrolling for an hour means you're not calling your mom, going for a walk, or getting an early night. The money or time you spend isn't just gone. It's redirected away from other valuable possibilities. The power comes when you stop letting opportunity cost lurk in the background and start making it explicit. Suddenly, decisions look very different. Take a job offer. Salary, easy to see, feels concrete. But the opportunity costs are invisible. Hours away from family, weekends lost to travel, hobbies on hold, energy drained so you can't side hustle or learn something new, friendships or community ties that fade because you're never around. Those things have real value, even if they don't show up on a paycheck or LinkedIn profile. The same lens works brilliantly on time, the most finite resource we have. We treat time like it's infinite. Sure, I'll say yes to this meeting/favor/project. But every hour committed is an hour forever unavailable for anything else. Opportunity cost thinking flips the default question from, what do I gain if I do this? To, what do I lose? What am I choosing not to do? If I say yes. That shift doesn't mean you become a robot who only does productive things. It just means your yes become more intentional. You're paying attention to the full price, not just the obvious one. The trap to avoid, taking it to the extreme. If you obsess over every tiny trade-off, watching this 20-minute YouTube video means I'm not learning astrophysics right now. You'll freeze or burn out. The point isn't perfect optimization of every second. It's awareness of meaningful trade-offs, especially on big forks in the road. Which job? What lifestyle, relationships, growth am I giving up? Which city to live in? What connections, culture, pace am I surrendering? Which relationship to invest in? What versions of myself or future paths am I closing off? When you honestly account for what each path asks you to surrender, not just what it gives, clarity usually appears. The right choice often reveals itself not as the one with the most upside, but the one whose downsides you can actually live with. Opportunity cost thinking isn't about regret or scarcity. It's about honoring the invisible half of every decision, the roads not taken. Because once you see them clearly, your choices stop feeling random and start feeling truly yours. Next time you're at a crossroads, pause and ask, what beautiful, valuable things am I choosing to let go of if I take this path? Answer that honestly, and the decision often makes itself. Second-order thinking. It's the simple but powerful habit of asking, and then what? After you spot the obvious first result of a choice. Most of us are pretty decent at seeing first-order effects, the immediate, surface-level consequences. Eat the cake tastes amazing right now. Fire off that angry email feels good in the moment, cathartic even. Buy the shiny new car, instant thrill of ownership and status. These are easy to predict because they hit fast and feel rewarding. Second-order thinking forces you to keep going. What happens after that first effect? What are the consequences of the consequences? Where does the chain reaction actually lead? Look at a classic business example. A company cuts customer service staff to save money. First order, expenses drop, short-term profits look better on the spreadsheet. Second order, wait times skyrocket, customers get frustrated and angry. Third order, satisfaction tanks, people switch to competitors. Bad reviews pile up, brand reputation suffers. Long-term revenue falls harder than the original savings. This smart cost cut ends up being a disaster, but only if you stop at the first-order view. Second-order thinking would have seen the full cascade coming and probably killed the idea early. The same pattern shows up everywhere in personal life. You decide to wake up an hour earlier to get more done. First order, extra hour in the morning, feels productive. Second order, if you don't go to bed earlier too, you're chronically underslept, energy crashes, focus suffers, mood sours, health takes a hit, productivity actually drops. Net result, worse off than before. But if you also shift bedtime earlier, sleep stays solid, mornings feel energized, real deep work happens, positive habits compound, better days overall. Second-order view flips the decision from probably a bad idea to game changer. This isn't about overthinking every tiny choice that would paralyze you. It's about training yourself, especially on big decisions, habits, relationships, career moves, investments, major purchases, to think like a chess player. Not just the next move, but the position 2 or 3 moves later. The practice is straightforward but takes discipline. After you see the obvious outcome, keep asking, if I do this, then what? And if that happens, then what? And after that, then what? It's almost meditative, slowly tracing the threads of cause and effect until hidden risks, upsides, or chain reactions reveal themselves. Second-order thinking doesn't guarantee perfect decisions, but it separates clever, quick, first-order wins from wise, long-term, full-picture outcomes. It helps you avoid self-inflicted traps and spot opportunities where others only see short-term pain. In a world obsessed with instant results, second-order thinking is quiet rebellion. You're not just reacting to what happens next. You're anticipating what happens after what happens next. Next time you're tempted by a quick win, pause and run the chain forward a few steps. Ask, and then what? The answer might save you years of regret or unlock years of compound upside. One deeper question at a time. Inversion thinking. It's one of the simplest yet most powerful mental tools you'll ever use. And it comes straight from Charlie Munger's favorite German proverb. Invert. Always invert. The core idea is dead simple. Instead of always asking, how do I succeed? Or what should I do? Flip the question and ask, how could I completely screw this up? What would guarantee failure? What should I absolutely avoid? Why does this work so well? Because our brains are wired by evolution to be much better at spotting dangers and threats than at optimizing for perfect success. We're survival machines. We're fantastic at noticing what could kill us or hurt us. Inversion thinking takes that natural strength and turns it into a deliberate strategy. Take a real example. You want a strong, happy marriage. Normal thinking. What makes a marriage great? Love, communication, shared goals, date nights. Inversion flips it. What destroys a marriage? The answers hit you fast and hard. Contempt, constant criticism, dishonesty, emotional neglect, lack of appreciation, poor communication, taking each other for granted. Once you have that clear list of failure modes, you can build a simple system to avoid them every single day. You don't have to invent genius ways to succeed. You just have to stay out of the obvious traps. Preventing disaster is often way easier and more reliable than forcing a home run. The same trick works brilliantly on almost anything. Building a business? Normal. How do we grow fast? Inversion. How could we guarantee failure? Easy answers. Run out of cash. Build something nobody wants. Hire toxic people. Destroy your reputation. Ignore customers. Make a checklist of those pitfalls and ruthlessly avoid them. Suddenly the path forward gets a lot clearer because you've marked all the landmines. Starting a new habit? Normal. How do I stick to the gym? Inversion. How could I make sure I quit in 2 weeks? Answers. No plan for bad days. Unrealistic goals. No accountability. Skipping recovery. Avoid those, and success becomes the default. Inversion is especially powerful in complex situations where there are a million ways to maybe succeed, but only a handful of ways to definitely fail. By identifying and blocking those failure paths first, you shrink the problem space and make good outcomes much more likely. It also counters our built-in optimism bias, that sneaky tendency to assume everything will work out fine while ignoring the risks. Inversion forces you to look straight at the dark side. What could go wrong? How bad could it get? What would I regret? This isn't being negative or pessimistic. It's being prepared. The ancient Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. They didn't do it to scare themselves. They did it to turn vague anxiety into concrete scenarios they could actually plan for and prevent. When you've already thought through the worst case, it loses its power over you. So next time you're facing a big goal, decision, or project, pause. Flip the script. Ask, how could this go completely wrong? What are the fastest ways to ruin it? Then make your plan to avoid those things first. You don't have to be brilliant to succeed. You just have to be smart enough to not be stupid. Inversion thinking gives you that edge, one inverted question at a time. Invert. Always invert. The cost-benefit matrix. It's one of the cleanest, most grounding ways to bring order to a messy decision. At its heart, the matrix is just a simple grid, or even two side-by-side lists, that forces you to lay out in plain sight. What do I stand to gain? The benefits. What do I stand to lose? The costs. You can keep it basic. 2 columns on a piece of paper or a note app. Or go deeper. A spreadsheet with rows for each factor, columns for benefit versus cost. Maybe even rough scores or weights if you want to compare apples to oranges on the same scale. The real magic isn't in perfect math or turning everything into numbers. It's in the act of making the invisible visible. When thoughts are just swirling in your head, they feel chaotic and overwhelming. When you write them down in a structured way, the trade-offs become concrete. You can literally see what you're trading for what. Take a big life move, like relocating across the country. Benefits might include higher paying / more exciting job, closer to family, lower cost of living, fresh start, new city energy, new experiences. Costs might include leaving close friends and social circle, emotional toll on kids / partner adjusting to new schools / environment, moving expenses and hassle, temporary career disruption for spouse, uncertainty and homesickness in the first year. Once it's all on the page, the emotional fog lifts a little. You're no longer wrestling with vague feelings. You're looking at a clear map of gains versus losses. You can start asking sharper questions. Which of these really matter most? Which costs am I willing or unwilling to pay? The matrix gets even more useful when the decision affects other people, a partner, kids, parents, team. Everyone's internal weighting is different. Your huge benefit, career growth, might be someone else's massive cost, leaving community. Create separate matrices for each stakeholder, or at least talk through them together. Compare them. You'll quickly see exactly where the misalignment lives, not as fuzzy disagreement, but as specific, discussable differences in priorities. A quick reality check. Not everything can, or should, be forced into the same units. A bigger salary and the comfort of staying near aging parents are both real, but they're not the same currency. Trying to slap arbitrary point values on deeply different things, love versus money versus time versus identity, can sometimes hide more than it reveals. The goal isn't to solve the decision with a spreadsheet score. It's to structure your thinking, make the trade-offs explicit, and give yourself clarity in the face of complexity. A good cost-benefit matrix doesn't magically make hard choices easy. It does something better. It makes them clearer. And in the middle of uncertainty, clarity is a quiet, powerful gift. So next time you're stuck on a big, or even medium, decision, grab a piece of paper or open a blank doc. Draw the line down the middle. List the upsides. List the downsides. Look at it. Breathe. The swirl in your head becomes a map on the page. And maps make navigation possible, even when the terrain is tough. One clear grid at a time. Decision trees. It's one of the clearest ways to turn a swirling, anxious decision into a visual map you can actually navigate. Picture your current situation as the trunk of a tree. From there, the main branches are your immediate options. Each branch then splits again and again into possible outcomes, new choices, and further consequences, stretching out into different versions of your future. It's especially useful for decisions that aren't one and done, the kind where today's choice opens or closes doors tomorrow, creating a whole cascading network of paths. Example, you're at a fork, start a business or stay in your current job. From start a business branch, it takes off and becomes very successful, maybe 20% chance. Then new choices, scale aggressively, sell, stay lifestyle business. It moderately succeeds / muddles along, maybe 60%, keep grinding, pivot, hire help, or eventually wind down. It fails outright, maybe 20%, cut losses, learn from it, try again with new idea, or pivot back to employment. From stay in your job branch, you get promoted / grow steadily more responsibility, higher pay, but maybe more stress or golden handcuffs. Things stay roughly the same stability, but potential boredom or stagnation over years. You get laid off or the role becomes obsolete, scramble for new job, upskill, or take time off. The tree grows fast and gets messy. That's the feature, not the bug. It forces you to externalize the complexity so it's no longer just looping thoughts in your head. You can literally draw it out on paper, whiteboard, or even a simple app and see the full landscape of possibilities. The real power comes when you start assigning rough probabilities to the branches. Educated guesses, not precise forecasts. 60% moderate success, 20% big win, 20% failure. Even crude percentages make you confront uncertainty head-on. You stop pretending you control every outcome. You control only the choices you make today, and you start thinking in terms of ranges and distributions of what could happen. Trace a few full paths end to end. What if the business fails, but the skills, network, and scar tissue you gain open doors to better opportunities later? What if staying safe in the job feels comfortable now, but 5 years from now your options feel narrower, skills rustier, regrets louder? The tree doesn't spit out the right answer. It does something better. It shows you the shape of the territory. Patterns jump out, paths with upside but big downside risk, safe but narrow routes, high-variance adventures, low-variance stability plays. When the decision lives only in your mind, it feels overwhelming and emotional. When it's drawn as a tree on paper, it becomes structured, objective, and strangely calming. You can step back, look at the whole map, and ask, which version of the future do I want to walk toward? Knowing full well none of them are guaranteed. Draw the trunk. Branch out the options. Label the splits. Estimate the odds. Walk the paths in your mind. Suddenly the fog lifts a little. The decision isn't solved, but it's finally stable. And when you can see the tree, you can start choosing which branches feel most worth climbing. The Eisenhower Matrix, a dead simple 2x2 grid that cuts through the chaos of daily demands and helps you actually focus on what matters. Dwight D. Eisenhower, World War II general, later U.S. president, lived under constant pressure to make high-stakes calls. He boiled it down to one brutal truth. Urgent and important are not the same thing. Urgency yells at you. Importance speaks quietly. Most people confuse the two and spend their lives putting out fires instead of building something meaningful. The Matrix has 4 quadrants. Urgent plus important, do first/do now, true crises, pressing deadlines, emergencies, health scares, last-minute client demands. These must be handled immediately, but if this quadrant dominates your life, you're in reactive mode. Important plus not urgent, schedule/protect, the real magic zone. Strategic planning, deep work, learning new skills, exercise, preventive health, relationship nurturing, long-term goal setting, reflection time. Nothing here screams for attention today, so most people ignore it. But this is where real progress and life-shaping work happens. Protect this time fiercely. Urgent plus not important, delegate/minimize. Interruptions, most emails, some meetings, other people's minor crises, low-value requests. These feel pressing because someone else is demanding your attention. Handle quickly if you must, delegate when possible, or batch them to limit damage. Not urgent plus not important, eliminate/delete. Mindless scrolling, busy work, gossip, trivial distractions, low-value habits. Cut these ruthlessly. They steal time without giving anything back. The matrix looks obvious on paper, but living it consistently is transformative. You stop treating every notification as a crisis and start asking, is this actually important or just loud? The deepest insight, most urgent crises are preventable. They're the direct result of neglecting quadrant 2 for too long. Skip preventive car maintenance breakdown on the highway, suddenly urgent. Ignore health and fitness, sudden illness, or burnout, suddenly urgent. Never invest in relationships, emotional distance, or blow-up fights, suddenly urgent. Avoid strategic thinking, career stagnation, or bad pivots, suddenly urgent. The Eisenhower Matrix isn't just a to-do list sorter. It's a life design tool. By deliberately carving out protected time for the important, but not urgent stuff, you reduce future chaos and start shaping your days and years intentionally instead of reactively. How to use it in practice. At the start/end of each day or week, dump your tasks into the 4 quadrants. Ruthlessly question everything in quadrants 3 and 4. Block calendar time for quadrant 2 like it's a non-negotiable meeting with your future self. Handle quadrant 1 as needed, but aim to shrink it over time. Simple grid. Profound shift. Stop chasing urgency. Start owning importance. One quadrant at a time. How to think clearly. Clear thinking doesn't come naturally. Our brains were built for survival, not for flawless truth-seeking. We're loaded with cognitive biases, emotional knee-jerks, social conformity pressures, and ancient mental shortcuts that kept our ancestors alive but constantly trip us up in the modern world. Thinking clearly is a skill, something you train, like lifting weights or playing an instrument. It takes deliberate, repeated effort over time. The starting point is simple but powerful. Your first thought is almost never your best thought. Your immediate gut reaction, snap judgment, or emotional flare-up is usually polluted by biases, mood, fatigue, or hidden wishes you don't even notice. Clear thinking begins the moment you learn to pause and treat that first impulse as raw material, not final truth. Core practice number 1. Separate facts from beliefs from wishes. Most of the time, these three get mashed together into one blurry story we call my opinion. To cut through the fog, write down the facts, the verifiable, observable, objective pieces. What actually happened? What data exists? What can you prove? Write down your interpretations, what you think those facts mean, your story about them. Write down what you want to be true, your hopes, fears, desires that quietly shape the story. Look at the three lists side by side. You'll often see how much your desires have crept into your facts and how interpretations have dressed up as reality. Creating that separation, even on paper, opens up a little space between what is and what you want to believe. Clarity lives in that gap. Core practice number 2. Question your certainty. The stronger you feel 100% sure about something, the more you should stop and ask, what evidence would actually change my mind? If the honest answer is nothing or almost nothing, you're not thinking, you're rationalizing. You've locked in a belief and are now just defending it. Real clear thinking stays open to new evidence. It holds beliefs with strength proportional to the current evidence and updates them when better evidence arrives. That's not flip-flopping or weakness. It's intellectual honesty. Core practice number 3. Protect your mental state. Your brain is a high-performance tool, but it's also fragile. When you're tired, hungry, angry, stressed, lonely, drunk, or hormonal, your thinking quality drops dramatically. Decisions made at 2 a.m. after a brutal day are rarely good ones. The same brain that's sharp at 9 a.m. after good sleep can be foggy, impulsive, and irrational at 11 p.m. Rules of thumb. Make big/important decisions when you're rested, fed, calm, and clear-headed. If you can't wait and have to decide in a compromised state, acknowledge the handicap. Be extra cautious, get a second opinion, write pros/cons, sleep on it if possible, or at minimum flag to yourself, this might not be my clearest thinking. Treat your mind like expensive equipment. Don't run it on empty, don't overheat it, don't slam it with emotional noise right before you need precision. Clear thinking isn't just clever techniques, it's conditions. It's creating the environment where your brain can actually do its best work. In the end, clear thinking is less about being the smartest person in the room and more about being the one who's most willing to pause before reacting. Separate fact from story. Question certainty. Protect mental bandwidth. Update when reality demands it. It's slow, unglamorous work most days. But over time, that quiet discipline compounds into sharper judgment, fewer regrets, and decisions that actually align with reality, not just with what feels good in the moment. Start small. Next time you catch yourself feeling super certain, or super emotional, or deciding something important when you're wiped out, pause. Separate. Question. Protect. One clear moment at a time. Your future self will thank you.